Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me this week, my own personal travel agent whenever I need someone sent to Belize, it's Dan. Hey, Dan.
Actually, I'm Brian, but if you want, we can talk to Dan in a second. So, hey, good evening.
Well, and as spoilery Dan just revealed, also here to talk it up, someone who's so nice he's never immune to good advice, Brian. Hey, Brian.
Hey guys, good to see you.
So wait, you are Brian though? You're not Dan? Okay.
I am Brian, but I do endorse Waffle House as an unofficial eating place. There may be some spillover between Dan and I. I don't know if we got mixed up in the transporter room or.
Well, yeah, that's because the bad guy in Dexter season 1 is a serial killer named Brian, so it kind of works.
Of course.
And that's the only serial killer named Brian. We are here to discuss what I would say is the next 4 episodes of Breaking Bad Season 5, which are essentially the episodes 9 through 12 of that final season. So we're going to go through those 4 episodes as we have done in the past, and we hopefully will be able to take a few minutes afterwards, maybe to mention a few other things that we're currently watching or recently finished. Depends on energy levels and just how long this podcast runs for, because the dopier and sillier some of us get as we get there. Now I can't promise if anyone starts getting too silly that someone might get slapped. That could always be some chaos on the horizon here, but hopefully that won't have to happen. That hopefully that'll be my only slight mild reference to the Will Smith incident. So we'll just figure kind of mention it somehow, right? Wow, crickets. Right.
I don't know. I have no idea what to talk.
All right, so crickets and audio gibberish aside, let's get started with the so-called 9th episode of Season 5, and that would be Blood Money. This episode was actually directed by Bryan Cranston and written by Peter Gould. Now, with this one, I would say much like the opening scene of the first episode of the season, this one also begins with a scene that could literally just simply be part of the actual finale of the series. I think it's something we might not have known that for sure when we saw this for the first time, but I'm sure that we all kind of suspected that's what was going on here. Yes. I thought someone was going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was concurring.
Oh, gotcha. Once we move away from that scene, there's something that they do, Cranston does, I guess, or him and the cinematographer do. It's really nice. I just love how the camera just slowly moves towards the bathroom door. And, you can still hear Walt and Skylar and the rest of them outside. And apparently there's a Squeeze song playing, which I didn't remember, quite frankly. But I just loved it because we were all waiting. And keep in mind, they split the season in half, but they, much like what they did with Mad Men, they didn't only make us wait a couple months. They made us wait pretty much an entire year before they got back to it, which makes me say it's really season 6, but whatever, guys. But I love that where we left off with, Hank on the toilet and that look on his face. So as we're slowly approaching that bathroom door, where I just love how they're able to get tension out of that, just basically based of us remembering what we had seen before or previously on Breaking Bad. And that I really got a kick out of that.
I like that it's overlaid with the voices in the background, and you just they're just audible enough to hear little bits and pieces. Almost like you're in the house. The viewer is the one in the house caught between these two things. It's really effective. It's like you're waiting outside the door for Hank to walk out or to see what's happened.
Right. And again, and I know I said this on one of the other Breaking Bad podcasts. I don't recall which one specifically. Just something about that house. I again find it interesting, and maybe it's just me. Is that the only bathroom in the house? Is it? Because it seems
Yeah,
go on.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is.
So whenever Junior has to use the bathroom, he has to go through his parents' bedroom to get to the bathroom. That's
Yeah,
weird.
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe they have another half bathroom or something. I don't know.
Okay, so I think there is another. So then it's like, what the hell is Hank doing using the bathroom in the master bedroom? That's not the bathroom guest should use. Anyway, just what I'm thinking. See, I have a lot of bathroom obsession, so I couldn't. I'm going to focus. On
Hey, man,
like that.
I give Hank props for being able to, do his business in someone else's house. That's enough. That's terrifying enough.
Oh, we talked about that last time. It's like, I cannot believe you were going to be dropping a deuce at someone else's place. I mean, there has to be no, just can't do it. Can't do it. So, and of course they're very cute here when Hank comes back to the backyard. He walks out right in the midst of a conversation, and it's right at the point where Marie is basically declaring that, Walt, you're the devil. And I was like, they're so cute when they do stuff like that. Now, one thing I want to mention from the top, and that I thought was kind of fun with this episode, there's a number of I call them mirroring moments throughout this episode. Now, some of them are, I would say, are self-contained, means they all happen within the same episode. Like the Hello Carol thing, because in the opening scene, which we didn't talk about, where we fast forward to him returning to the house after everything has obviously gone to shit, and he sees his former neighbor outside. He says, "Hello, Carol," and then we have a friendly scene between his neighbor. Obviously, whatever months earlier, a year earlier, it would be a year actually, in this episode. Or you have moments, I think, that just echo things from the past. Like one of the scenes we'll get to in a moment, like Walt and Jesse sitting on the couch together. And it's like, oh, this is not the same kind of Walt and Jesse next to each other on the couch moment that we had, even earlier this season. But I think it's done. It's even framed that in a similar fashion to show, it's the same, but it's very different now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Walt even in that scene on the couch says something like, "Here we are again," and he says "deja vu."
Right.
To tie that we're gonna sort of see. Not a retelling, but sort of an homage to the first 8 episodes in this, that we're going back to the same places, shot the same, but with added stuff like in the scene you're referring. I mean, we talked before, that Walt was menacing and Jesse was scared, and now we see them going into these scenes with different personalities. And I think probably the striking thing where we see the passage of episode is that Walt is maybe most like season 1 Walt we've seen him in a long time, when he's putting on the Walt face, to use what we've talked about before, that when they're sitting outside with the family, that's the most Walt has been Walt in a long time, which is also, a callback to early in the show.
Right. It's interesting you should say that, because I think I had said, or we had said, whoever said, probably with me, whatever, that at a certain point it's shifted to he's more during this part of the season, I would say, or one could say the way we end season 4 maybe, but I was definitely going into season 5, where it's that I made that horrible but yet true Batman analogy, it's like he's more Heisenberg now, and Walter White has become the persona that he puts on as an act, whatever, rather than the other way around. Or maybe it's just because Heisenberg had become his comfort zone, so to speak, because that is where he felt in control. And, so when, And he doesn't even need the hat necessarily, although it's nice to have. Um, there's a scene early in this, and I hate my. I realized that I had never rewatched the final bunch of episodes since 10, 11 years ago because I had forgotten about it, and I was like, how did I forget this of all things? It's the Star Trek script talk, Dan. I mean, I love, you know what? It's a credit to our friendship that I've been a Star Trek fan for many years. I've had a lot of friends, and both my parents were big Star Trek people. My father had tons of Star Trek paperbacks. They built models, all that crap. I just remember all that right now. Well, I got getting a little misty eyed now. But it's a credit to you that you are the first person I think of. And I'm watching that scene. I'm thinking, I hope that Dan really loved this as much as I did, just because of the absurd nature of it. And then I realized something that, Dan, I bet you can think of something that occurred to me. You might be the only person I know who might say what occurred to me while I was watching that scene. Want me to give you a hint?
Yeah, go for it. It's been a bit since I watched the episode. So.
Okay. So I'm watching so Dan, we're both watching a series that we love. And there's a moment in this series where there's a side character, not a main character, a side character, who apparently is writing or has written a Star Trek script. Hey, have we seen that before?
It seems vaguely familiar, yes.
Yeah, Mad Men.
Yep.
I just realized what might be possibly two of our favorite series of all time, or they are both have a moment where there's a side character who's talking about having written a Star Trek script. I thought that was an amazing little tie-in. There we go. So if people get anything out of this podcast, I hope they got that out of it.
Yeah, both scripts were probably both equally drug fueled too. So.
Yeah. I will also say that if anyone if you go on YouTube and you look up, put in like Breaking Bad Star Trek, someone did a little quickie animation version of it with Badger telling the whole thing, and it's done with, puerile but still fun animation. It's only 2 minutes.
It's pretty cool.
And I would say there is a 99% likelihood that while I do not plan to insert any clips during the course of our conversation in this episode of this podcast, which is an episode as well, I do plan to end the podcast with that Star Trek script talk. So something to look forward to. That will be, I haven't decided, do I put it before the music? Do I put it instead of the music? Do I put the music after it? Silly production things I'll figure out later, but it's got to be in there, and it's going to be there.
It's a wonderful segment, and they don't rush it. Like, they really let it go and let him tell the full story. And the two things, I do not have the street cred you guys do with Star Trek. My Star Trek fandom was, as a kid, I was into Star Trek, and I had the Star Trek playset with the teleporter and the Mego action figures, which were really cool, and big size figures. And then as I got older, the new generation sort of passed me by, and I caught up to it later as I was in a different place in my life. But the thing that brings me back when I watch this, I do remember one thing from that recalls some strong childhood memories of being a young kid and going, wow, Yeoman Rand is really pretty. And he specifically refers to Yeoman Rand in that. And I thought that was a nice touch to mention a not often used character to throw in, that I think a lot of young guys were ready to go to the stars for Yeoman Rand.
I was ready to do something. Yes. Yeah, I love Yeoman Rand. I was always annoyed that beyond Chekhov and Sulit, they didn't do a Yeoman Rand figure for the Mego figures. I love that transporter. Anyway, so back. And I also love that in in a subsequent episode that they drop a reference that apparently Badger also spent a lot of time talking about Babylon 5 too. So apparently Badger might be one of the few people when they're high I might not have a problem hanging out with. All right. So now I'd mentioned the thing about just now about Walt being, the whole personas and being more Heisenberg than Walter White, whatever. But we've also noticed, and I've mentioned before, how he almost chameleon-like, to a slight extent, he takes on attributes of those that he's quote unquote vanquished from season to season. And we've seen little bits of this character or that character. And they really are doing it here in this episode with him mirroring Fring. There's the whole thing about when he lays down that small towel, in a very delicate fashion before he pukes, which basically echoes what Fring does in the, what was the name of the episode where he poisons everybody? Salute? Is it Salute? Yeah.
Yep.
So I thought that was kind of like, oh, that's right. And even the fact that it's interesting. This show is so much about color schemes, right? I mean, anyone who's paid attention knows that, it's one of the hallmarks of Breaking Bad, that different characters have a certain color scheme that they're identified with, and it means this, that, da, 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 da. And it's interesting that his color scheme, while it is still there's a certain, Walter White quality to it. The slight yellow creamish color of what he's wearing kind of sort of echoes the Fring shirt and color scheme a little bit too. And thus when he goes to the dark colors, it also reminds us, Fring also went to the dark colors like that. So I thought that was interesting. There is something else very notable about these 4 episodes at a certain point as far as color schemes. I don't think it happens in this episode, so I don't think I should mention it just, who cares? We're talking about all 4. Really significantly is Marie. Did you guys know about that? The whole thing that she changes her color scheme during these episodes when everything kind of goes awry. That, cause Marie, obviously, probably the most ridiculous, overuse of color with her is her fondness for purple, which we see everywhere. It's in their bedroom, it's their rugs, it's everything. And it's generally, it's what she's wearing unless she's dressed in her, X-ray technician outfit or something. And at a certain point when things go off the rails, Marie no longer is wearing purple. Marie wears black for the rest of the season, which I guess one could say there's a lot of ways to interpret that. The first one that came to my mind was it's foreshadowing the fact that she's going to be a widow very soon. So she's wearing all black. That was my first. Or all the joy has been sucked out of her life and she's wearing all black. However you want to look at it. But the widow thing is what I was thinking.
You saying that makes me think that at some point we had talked about that, or I remember, but I didn't recall it watching the episodes.
Right. Oh, I know I didn't notice it when I was watching it initially. It's a combination of rewatch, looking up shit online. Oh, look, trivia. I'll let you know. If I say something that's insightful like that I actually came up with myself, I'll make. Oh, by the way, I came up with that myself. I didn't just grab it off IMDb or something. My interpretation I came up with, but not the noticing the color thing. I didn't see it myself.
Well, sure. I will say I did look up some trivia because I got curious with Matt Jones getting this long, section to do the Star Trek thing. Mm-hmm. And it made me start to think like what other shows are connected, have a lot of connective thread with this, it share actors and people in common. And I actually found an interesting connection that a lot of people connected to The Office are connected to Breaking Bad. Matt Jones played Dwight Schrute's cousin on The Office. Bob Odenkirk obviously was on an episode of The Office and was a finalist for Michael Scott. And Bryan Cranston actually directed an episode of The Office. You have Mark Prosh, I don't know that played Nate, that makes a brief appearance on The Office. You have David Constable, who was the one-day auditor, who also played Gail Bedecker. And the most interesting thing I found is they believe in the episode where Dwight goes to the suit shop and buys a suit, that some people believe that's an Easter egg in Better Call Saul when Jimmy goes to get his suit, that it's the same tailor shop. So I just kind of went down a rabbit hole and thought, that it's interesting that those two shows have so many actors in common, and Cranston even worked on it. And Odenkirk was a finalist for Michael Scott. So just some random trivia that I kind of went down the rabbit hole on today. And one more I forgot. Sorry. And Ryan Howard dresses at one of the Halloweens like Jesse Pinkman. So I forgot that one of their Halloween episodes.
Ryan Howard? Was that his name?
The temp.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like the guy who used to play for the Phillies. I got confused.
Well, he's on there too. But
there you go. Well, I know. I mean, me and Dan have talked about it in the past. That obviously, when the show first started out, you had all the lineage with the X-Files. So beyond Gilligan himself, many, if not most, of the actors had appeared at one time or another on the X-Files, if I'm not mistaken. Is it all of them, or are we missing, or is there like one person missing from that mix? Do you remember, Dan?
I don't think Skylar was.
Was Anna Gunn the one that might not
Yeah.
wasn't? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. No.
Oh, even though it's a later episode, just since we're talking about shows and links and speaking. Oh, wow! You think I had prepared this? You meant Anna Gunn. We knew her before Breaking as being on Deadwood, right? And apparently, in one of these episodes we're going to be talking about, if you look really closely at all the stuff that Hank and Marie have on their shelves, they have a box set, the same one that I have, I guess, and many of us have, of Deadwood. so the funnier bit of Easter egg thing, if you look real closely, it's one of those, and again, I found this online. I did not see it myself until I read it. Then I went back and found it, and I was like, oh my gosh. The funniest Easter egg, if you look really closely, those bastards put a DVD set of Breaking Bad on their shelves. So I don't know if that's like a meta inverse universe, here comes Doctor Strange. I don't know what the fuck. Anyway, so, but the thing I mentioned with him being like Fring, that's also, but again, that goes to my talking about the whole mirroring kind of thing, or even in that whole sequence where outside Hank's house, when Walt first pulls up, not to mention when he tears out of there, we've got that remote control car again. And let's be honest, at least the first time we saw this, were we not all waiting? It was almost like the ticking bomb, waiting for it to go off. It's the Hitchcockian thing, which is done in such a silly fashion here. Were we not all waiting for the car to run over that remote control car one more time?
Oh, totally.
Which, of course, mirrors when Marie did it. So, the way the kind of the breakdown in this episode, the way I think about it, and then we can get into more specifics. It's like, it breaks down like Walt lies to Jesse, but he tells the truth to Skylar, but then he lies again to Hank, but that lie doesn't last very long. That is essentially my synopsis of the episode. So, the stuff with Jesse, specifically in this episode, we know that the beginning of every season always has the Breaking Bad trope is Jesse has to begin every season in some sort of bad state of depression or fucked up, whatever. That's pretty much what they've been doing, at least definitely from season 3 on, because season 3 begins that way. Season 4 began that way. And then we get into this season. Now, this is still, I know it's the midpoint of a season, but it feels like it's a new season because it was a year later or whatever. And quite frankly, just give him an episode or two in season 2, because those first couple really should have been season 1 episodes. So you can look at the episode where he falls through the porta potty. That's the kickoff for that one here. The scene we were just talking about with Skinny Pete and Badger with the whole Star Trek story. And I'm going to go on for, let's talk about mirroring. I just thought of this. That is very, if you remember, there was another episode where Skinny Pete and Badger and Jesse are having this long, drawn out, back and forth. They're obviously on something conversation, and it's about zombies in video games. And they're, and he's and in this one, the way Jesse's just sitting there and his kind of his non-reaction to everything that's going on around him, it's kind of like mirror. It's like, okay, this is Jesse before, Jesse after. We've already talked about how it always feels like he's kind of outgrown these two, but now he's in such a weird, fucked up place. It's like, it's kind of like it's even beyond that.
And it's actually, not to get too meta, but I was struck at doing this rewatch that the story itself is basically a guy cheating at something to win, and somebody can't handle and keep up with what's going on. And, the result is like his guts get ripped out and sent into space and he dies. And, there's sort of a meta symbolism to, Jesse feeling like now that he's free and gotten away with it inside, like his insides have been torn out by what's happened. And so, they're sort of talking about this light thing. And on this other level, it's describing exactly what Jesse feels.
I'm going to have to recover from the heaviness of that. I feel bad about that story. That's a great observation.
It's a great story.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. So when I watch Stand By Me when they're all vomiting, I'm going to be thinking, anyway. Now, then later on, we have the scene with Jesse going to see Saul. Which also, and as we're watching the beginning of that scene when he's in the waiting room, and the way Francesca is kind of looking, Francesca is her name, right? It's kind of the look she's giving him and the way, and back and forth. And it will remind me in a couple of weeks when we get into talking about Better Call Saul. And I know the big mystery is that we were wondering about is what's going to happen to Kim. My mystery is at what point does Francesca become this sour, embittered, jaded, snide person? Because last we saw her in Better Call Saul, she wasn't. So I'm wondering if we'll see any of how that transition happens, or we'll just assume after time with Saul Goodman, she becomes this, I guess, whatever. I'm just curious. It just struck me again when I was watching it. Especially because I'm so used to her kind of having a reaction to when Walt shows up. So it's kind of fun to see it happen with Jesse, except Jesse then takes it further by lighting up a joint in the waiting room.
I think that you get bitter at your job when the lobby music is like a terrible, like Tex-Mex version of the Battle Hymn of the Republic that plays on a loop. I think that eventually you just completely lose your shit and that's it. It's over.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's but it's interesting just charting Jesse's path throughout this episode because obviously you had his pretty much almost nonverbal, whatever you want to call it, during the Pete and Badger stuff, to the way he is with Saul in this at the office and with Saul in this scene here, and then. But the big one is really what we had already hinted at is that scene that he has with Walt. And it's talking about when they're talking about Mike. And I feel like other than how we end the episode, which is the biggest thing, of course, that's the number 2 biggest thing in the episode to me. It's really bringing up the mics up and just and watching. It's interesting watching how Walt navigates his lies and the incredulous nature of how he does it, whatever. Because we've talked off and on about, how good or bad a liar Walt can be. And sometimes I get the feeling sometimes he's a bad liar on purpose. Because it's done in such a soap opera like fashion. He's certainly more convincing here than he normally is, which I thought was interesting. Whereas he's not he's not very convincing when he tries to lie to Skylar. I don't think that happens specifically in this episode or not, but when he does do it, he never can seem to pull it off. But I think he's become more skilled, or he feels he's become more skilled in how he manipulates Jesse. Except I think Jesse has started to get more wise to it. He certainly does at a certain point in these 4 episodes.
I think the thing that he may have gotten away with it with Jesse, but the way I viewed this scene is when he says, like, I need you to believe me. Tell me you believe me. Like it played to me almost more like an oath than a question. Like, everything will be cool if you just tell me you believe me. And it seemed like that's him stretching too far. And my read on it is, Jesse, I think Jesse really makes a great point that if Mike was alive, the money and stuff wouldn't matter, knowing that Walt killed all his guys. That where is Mike if that happened? And the Mike he knew had an honor that he wouldn't have allowed that without any reprisal. And then Walt goes into trying to convince him he's safe and it'll all be okay. And I think at some level, Jesse knows, like, if he tells Walt the truth that he doesn't believe him, he's dead. But by lying about it, like, and pretending it's all okay, he's dishonoring Mike. And on some level, he sees now, like, maybe Mike had more integrity than Walt. In a different way. And so, by just going along with Walt, he's less a person, less a man. And that's why the money's blood money and he can't live with it.
Right. It's interesting, interpreting it like an oath or a blood oath, if you will, since we're going to go with the title Blood Money, whatever, which makes sense. I kind of took it as whether it was not overt, but more underlying as a threat. I need you, because it's a threat. It's an underlying threat because it may not be something he wants to do, but it's something he might have to do. I think it's going to be happening during these episodes where it's like, okay, everyone seems to be pushing for him to do something that he seems to be the one who's unwilling to do it, which I find very interesting, but that's in a subsequent episode. But I feel, to me, I need you to believe me in a weird way is kind of the start of that. Yeah. Although Saul does drop something about that in the previous season, if I'm not mistaken. Right. Oh, that's way back. Is that season 3 I'm thinking of? Does he say something about maybe... Doesn't he drop the first thing about Jesse should go to Belize back in season 3?
Yeah,
when he's in the hospital, right. He kind of That's the first time we get the Belize thing. All right, so let's just get to that last scene because let's put it this way. I think when most, if not all of us, watched this episode for the first time way back when, I think the first thing that surprised us about it was, wow, they're getting to that now. They're not wasting time. Because I feel that we kind of assumed, because we saw that, Hank is figuring this out, but he's having, boxes of files dropped off at his house. He's trying to figure stuff out. I was like, okay, how many episodes is it going to be before we get any sort of a confrontation, before something along those lines happens? I was like, nope, we're going to do it now. We're going to do it in this episode. Because you know what? We don't have that many episodes left. Let's not waste time. that's why I thought it was funny. I was online the other day, and it was a conversation. It was in the midst of a conversation about Better Call Saul, actually, and someone was saying that they were saying that they think that they actually like Better Call Saul better than Breaking Bad at this point, and they referred to Better Call Saul as having efficient storytelling, and I had to chime in at that point. And I was like, look, the debate about which show is actually better, that's a totally valid debate. I could totally see a case being made one way or the other. Not arguing one being better than the other. Let's wait till the show is done before then we can look back and make that determination. However, there is no show, in my opinion, and maybe you guys agree, maybe not, don't know, that has more quote unquote efficient storytelling than a show like Breaking Bad. That to me is like the hallmark of this show. The reason why the Fly is such a polarizing episode, it's the one show that kind of breaks the norm about, tightly constricted storytelling. But still, it's an amazing episode because it is the one outlier that changes it. But otherwise, this is a very tautly paced, we don't waste time kind of show. It's not, I don't consider Breaking Bad a slow burn kind of a show. It's not. Maybe some people felt that way in the first season, but that's more about story and character introduction. You're building your universe before you can then, sorry. Why do I always apologize to the microphone when I hit it? So I'm not knocking the person who said that. I think he might even be a listener. I'm not sure. Can't remember. But I thought this episode is actually an example of that. When they came back and it's like, oh, look, they're not wasting time. They're getting right to it. Holy crap. And how much fun do you think it was for these two actors who have played so many scenes together during the course of this show? But this is the first time they got to have a scene like this. Where
it's delightful.
Yeah, it's an Old West showdown, face to face, nose to nose, threat to threat. I love when the pretense dissolves and it's like, nah, the lie is over. Clark Kent is Superman. Let's stop fucking around.
And I really think like the second half of this season, we've seen great stuff, but we really, to some extent, Bryan Cranston throughout the show has got to be Heisenberg and gets to have this menace and be dark and drop any sort of, frivolity or jokiness or quirks. He's, and Dean Norris gets to really drop all that crap and act the crap out of the second half of this season. And, he'd always sort of been, he had moments where he was great. I'm not saying he wasn't, but they really gave him stuff to work with, and he really delivered the goods on this second half of the season. And, going to your economy of storytelling point, I don't know many shows that would have 8 episodes left and like sort of the game would be up like an episode and a half or an episode or 2 episodes into that. A lot of storytelling would be like, hey, Hank would find out in the 6th episode and, or the 7th episode. And, like when it happened at the time, I think we all wondered like, wow, they're already breaking down that artifice. Where's it going to go from here? Like, what are they going to do with these episodes? Because it happened so fast.
Right. Because once you have that, it's like the first thought is, well, they can't possibly drag this out for 7 more episodes. Wow. I think we've just gotten so used to shows that have any sort of, pursuant investigative kind of situation where, okay, we're setting this up and now we're going to be pursuing them, whatever. And it was going to go on without them being aware of it. As we've seen certain kind of things happen on the show, even to some extent, like Hank when Hank was pursuing Gus Fring. You know, he didn't right off the bat have that meeting with him in the conference room at the headquarters. You know, it was a while before we got there. This same episode, bing, went right to it. Maybe he learned from not waiting. I don't know. And also, it should be pointed out because Cranston obviously directed the episode, and wow, I mean, Cranston knows how to fucking direct. Works when you have a really good script, of course, as well. Just saying that for my own. Anyway, that scene also, grabbing a trivia thing, out of, thank you, IMDb, happens to feature the line, which is Bryan Cranston's favorite line of the entire television series, which is it's the tread lightly line. It is a good line. It's a good, and of course that's the perfect, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the perfect, it's the peanut butter and chocolate kind of combination of, it's a well-written line, but it's also because it's such a well-delivered line. It's the way he hits those words. It's the pause. It's the lowered voice. And I'll take the tread lightly over, I'm the danger any day of the week, because it's just, again, it's much like the thing with Jesse, but here it's overt. It's the implied menace. It's the threat. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah, it's the coldest shivers down your spine moment you could deliver to somebody that you purported to care about for this long. But basically you're saying like, hey, he tried all the moves. He tried, it's not me. What's this? Just let me go. I'll die. And then when Hank says like, I don't even know who I'm talking to. I don't know who you are. And in that moment, Walt knows like, he's not going to fool him, and drops. And then you see, like we've talked about, like really Walt is now the act and Heisenberg is there, and that's who he is.
Exactly.
To be able to threaten your brother-in-law who you claim to care about, and obviously there's internal battle going on in him about Hank as it goes forward, but to drop that and say that to somebody that's like taking care of your kids and you cared about, then Heisenberg is who he is.
What's lovely to think about is, again, I know this is the quote unquote midpoint of season 5, but to me, I think of it as it's the opening episode of what's really season 6 or 5/B, if you whatever. I'd love to just jump back to the pilot episode and the interactions and the scenes between Walt and Hank and who they were and what they were then and where we are now. And you realize not that basically a year has passed, and look where these two guys are now and what they are right now. It's striking when, again, we talk about the fact that we love shows when you see how characters shift and change and evolve or devolve or however you want to say it. And again, that is certainly indicative of the show with each and every primary or main character. Especially at least your top 4 or 5 characters on the show.
And let me add, you just made me think of something that you talk about mirroring. The thing that flips the Hank and Walt thing is Walt bringing up the tracking device when he's walking out of the garage, stops, and probably could have walked and left Hank still wondering, but has to turn back in and go ask him about it, and says, do you remember, just like the one we used with Gus Fring?
Right.
So there's more of the Gus Fring mirroring with Walt.
Right. Yeah, and it's sort of like when we were talking about a previous episode, when the fellow who was originally in charge was, bemoaning what had happened with Gus Fring and how this is a person who he had to his house and was under his nose the whole time, and that whole thing, and we all spoke about it then. It's like, then Hank's just sitting there, and we're all like, yeah, he's talking about you right now. That's the writer is, I should say. He's basically, replace a couple names. It's the Hank Walt relationship. And there you are. All right. Should we just move on to the next episode then? Everybody?
I was just gonna say that I like the scene where Lydia goes to the car wash, and then Walt like doesn't lie to Skylar about it. I kind of like appreciate that.
Thank
like
you.
he kind of like he isn't like full Heisenberg at this point. I mean, he just kind of feels like he's left a lot of that shit behind now that he's like proven his point that he's going to be like the best at something. So it just kind of it's just nice to see the character like mature a little bit after being kind of a constantly lying and disrespecting her and stuff. Plus, it was just a funny scene.
Right.
Period.
It's I when I gave the quickie my quickie version of a synopsis, I mentioned he tells the truth to Skylar. That's exactly what I was meaning, and I thought that was very interesting. I'm glad you actually stopped me before we went on. That's actually a really great point to bring up. It's interesting that he barely hesitates. I mean, and when he does it in a believable, just a human fashion, not calculating, kind of whatever fashion. Now one can say have they gotten to a better point where they were before? Is it because Skylar is so much more complicit in everything that's going on? Or maybe at this point it's like Skylar has shown over and over, you know what? At this point, she's not a fucking idiot. She knows.
Right.
There's that other scene later, which I love about her when she saw through his bullshit, whatever. Or was that in the previous episode? I can't remember anymore. They're all getting confused to me. But yeah, Lydia showing up there and that whole thing going down. And part of me was going, ooh, everyone's being mean to Lydia, but Lydia's the one with the hair. Has got a hair trigger like Walt. She might hire someone to kill somebody if people aren't careful. But I did enjoy that a lot. So good call.
But I think that's an excellent call, Dan, because I think Walt being out of the game, like she I think believes Walt's truly out of the game because she basically tells Lydia, "Don't you ever come back here." Like, I think if she believed Walt was still in the game and that sort of broke through, she probably wouldn't have taken that action. But I think she believes he's really out of the game and maybe they can move on. And because of that, she can't allow anybody like that close to her or the family.
Yeah.
And also, this is also if there is a calculated nature on Walt's part, which maybe there should be for everything he does at this point, this is an opportunity to really make the point to Skylar that he's out, to prove it even, so it could be looked at that way as well, actually. Because, we're not going to give him the benefit of the doubt, are we? No, of course not. Alrighty then. So let's get to the 10th episode. That would be Buried. That was directed by Michelle McLaren and written by Thomas Schnauz. Love his name. So, one thing we didn't mention about Jesse from the previous episode is that Jesse goes on a little $1 million giveaway as he's riding around the neighborhood and tossing money hither and yon. So when we kick off this episode, we get that old fella coming out of his house and finding one bundle of money here, one bundle of money there. And then eventually he follows a little trail of money bundles to Jesse actually lying on a, what do you call it? It's not there's a word for it. What is that called? The little roundabout thing.
It's a merry-go-round.
Is it simply just a merry-go-round? I thought there was kind of a more of a technical name for it, kind of a human lazy Susan or something. If I'm not mistaken, is this the episode that happens in? I think, is this the episode where we have Jesse at the beginning and then we have Jesse at the end, but Jesse never actually speaks? If I'm not mistaken, I think he doesn't actually speak in this episode. Not sure. And
yeah,
I think he doesn't speak in this episode. But although he's definitely in it, I think he bookends it. What I was being somewhat mostly serious about before, about how Jesse kicks off every season, it seems, in some sort of deep funk, depression, whatever. The fact that, one could also say he's always going through some sort of downward spiral. And so then we actually see it, in literal fashion where he's just spinning around like that is kind of funny, I thought. It's like, way to be on the nose, guys. Anyway. So we pick up this episode beyond that cold open back to Walt and Hank. We kind of pick up where we left off with Walt and Hank. And again, this is when Walt's tearing out of there. This is where he tears out. And again, we think, is he going to hit the remote control car now? No. Wow. Cannot believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote Chekhov's remote control car in my notes, and I was about to start the plot this time.
See, if it only had been Tobar instead of a remote. Oh man, I just dated myself, and probably no one's going to get that reference on the podcast. So, but he tears out of there because he's trying to get in touch with Skylar, and then he realizes that she's probably on the phone with somebody else. Somebody he just left, because he sees Hank is on the phone. He puts it if I'm not mistaken, he puts it together that Hank has already gotten Skylar on the phone. So Walt kind of goes into, high speed panic mode at this point, right?
Yeah.
Now, this kind of leads us to, okay, this was a really kind of a unique scene to happen. Again, we get a lot of them in this final stretch. The Hank and Skylar scene. When Skylar goes to meet him at it's just a diner. It's not Denny's, I don't think, in this one. So, it's probably the diner that Mikey's is, quite frankly. I'm not sure. What did you think of the Hank and Skylar scene? Because I think that's a very interesting scene for when you're watching it, and there's a belief it's going one way, and then I think before Skylar even says anything, just from the way she's reacting to things, facially, whatever, as Brian, if it was the phrase he used, face acting. Wow, it was very, very eloquent. That's how we know you're a lawyer. Not like that word acting, face acting. Here's some mouth acting. But I just, it's always interesting when you set up a scene between two characters who are obviously every written whatever comedy, drama, whatever, it's about conflict between characters. It's more interesting when it's not just simply conflict, but you have two characters at very cross purposes, which is what the case would be with these two here. And these two getting to play a scene with each other, again, much like Walt and Hank in the previous, like they have not done before, quite frankly. So I thought, and again, it's going to what you were saying, Brian, about Dean Norris really getting to do some things he hasn't gotten to do on the show before, which I think they've been doing. I mean, they've really been giving him so much more to do from season 2 on, once he started having the panic attacks, and then his depression and dealing with the injury, whatever, and then he kind of goes into Hank becomes Columbo for a little while there, and now he goes from Columbo to name of the Inspector Gerard. Look at that. I don't need notes. I got it all up here. So what'd you think of that scene? I thought that was a really significant scene here.
I thought my impression of it is you start out a scene with being on Hank's side, and you see Skylar come in, and Hank starts arguing to Skylar, and by the end of the scene, Skylar has alienated Hank, but you sort of switched your allegiance to seeing what she's saying, that she's won over the audience while alienating him, because all he's doing is all the things that would not only hurt Walt, but hurt her and her family. And when she asks the simple question, like, would it, I need a lawyer, or would maybe I need representation? Hank's reaction is like, no, we got to get this done, and we've got to charge forward. And anytime she asks a reasonable question, he ignores her to the point that she decides to leave. And you obviously see she was right, that she was never going to get to walk away from it. And he can't see it. And so your sympathy kind of shifts towards her by the end of the scene, away from him.
Yeah, I don't know. I think just the problem with Hank here is he makes the assumption that she's not as complicit in all this as she actually is. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really. I mean, Hank definitely doesn't handle the situation well, but I mean, I think he doesn't handle it well just because he's giving Skylar I guess more credit than she deserves. I guess if we're just judging this on observing the law standpoint.
But even if that's true, when he gets up and grabs her and won't let her leave, if she's completely innocent, even if she was completely innocent, like in my book, like that's way too far. Like he's crossed a line. He's put his hands on her and trying to prevent her from leaving. And so, I mean, even if he assumed if he really assumed she was innocent, and I do think you're right, I'm not disagreeing with that point, but assuming if she was, the way he's acting is not rational to an innocent or a guilty person at that point. And she's right to fear what he's trying to do.
Yeah, well, I think he starts out thinking that she's like innocent, and then when she starts to trying to lawyer up and stuff, I think he kind of is taken off guard and reacts poorly. But I don't think I think he definitely starts to get the impression that he misjudged the situation, part way through it, and that he didn't really, that she, just there's a lot going on there. It's all happening pretty fast, but he doesn't handle it really well. But
see, my issue is the fact that I'm sorry. I don't care if it's your sister-in-law, your best friend, or even your own wife, for that matter, or your mom, or whatever. I don't know, whatever connection you want to make. If the moment they suggest or they wonder, because I think initially it's a question about getting a lawyer, and they're immediately dismissive of that. Especially someone who himself is in, is an officer of the law to the extent that he is.
He could make some kind of a deal for her too, so maybe, I'm just saying that, I'm not trying to get
you speak to even maybe not a 5-year-old, but you speak to a lawyer first before you do anything. Just to make sure, because he can't guarantee anything.
Exactly.
He's not the district attorney. He's not and plus he's remember, Hank is not. I'm not saying Hank is acting irrationally. That's a little too far. But he is acting out of emotion. He's rushing things, because originally he was going to go about things in a methodical way to make sure he had his case, and then when Walt shows up, it kind of blows that up. Doesn't really blow it up. It pushes him to do this. And he realizes, okay, I got to rush. What's my best way to do this? Oh, Skylar. Skylar's my best way to do this, because she'll have the goods on him, and now I'm putting it together with everything that's been happening when they made the kids stay at our house. She must be a victim in all this, and that's how he's treating it. He treats it initially like you're right. You're absolutely right. He thinks of her as being a victim initially, and then as the conversation goes on, he realizes, oh, okay, that she may be an accomplice to whatever extent, and then it just the tone changes. It's like I said, it's a very interesting scene. I love that we get a scene between two characters we don't know. When we think about all the cool or great or interesting scenes on the show, it's usually not a Hank Skylar scene that comes to mind. It might be a Hank scene. It might even be a Skylar scene with someone, but not the two of them together. But I really, when she makes the big stink in front of everybody there, it took me right back to what she did back when she was dealing with when they were trying to bust her for the shoplifting that Marie actually did, And I again went to my screw all the people that were anti-Skylar. She's fucking fearless at times. She will do what needs to be done. My appreciation of Skylar has increased during this rewatch. I'm remembering all the people who didn't like her. I was like, you people were fools. Speaking of fools, one of the notable fun things about this episode, I think we all remember it fondly, is I think it's Dan's favorite combo of Breaking Bad, Huel and I always mispronounce Kubi.
Kubi.
Kubi. Is it Kubi? Okay.
Kubi.
When they have their Scrooge McDuck scene, it's and it's one of there's actually a handful of genuine laughs in this episode, and you would think, especially after the way the last one let off and knowing what's going on and the way Walt is, you wouldn't think there would be anything left to laugh at on this show. But this is one of the scenes that makes you laugh, and I think Huell actually gets off one, if I'm not mistaken, one of the great lines. Isn't it still where he says, "All Mexico. All I'm saying is Mexico." Something
Yeah.
like that.
He goes, Mexico. That's all I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying.
And at the time this show came out, I didn't know who Bill Burr was, and now obviously most people know who Bill Burr was. But even tempered with that, there's that great piece of writing where Bill Burr, Kuby says, this guy whacked 10 guys inside in 2 minutes. That's all I'm saying. Like, that it's humorous, but also like Heisenberg's legend has grown that these two grunts know of his reputation for ruthlessness.
Right. And as we continue with this piece of the storyline in the episode, because obviously Huell and Kuby lead to Saul and Walt, whatever. Okay, I first of all, between the Saul and Walt together, we get one of my favorite lines dropped by Saul about monkeys in the banana patch, which is for whatever reason, always one of my favorites. I want it on a T-shirt, and might be the funniest thing yet. Yes, I'm going to say funnier than the scene we just said because of Saul bringing up the Belize thing again. When Cranston delivers the line, "Send him to Belize," so I'll send you to Belize. I think that's one of the funniest things on the entire show. Just the way because it takes us totally out of the whole, oh my God, intense people are going to be murdered kind of thing. It's just like, send you to Belize. That's just, I mean, it just made me, just even thinking about it just makes me smile. It's so fucking funny. And that's when obviously it's the money in the barrels, and this is going to lead to the beginning of the burial, which obviously we see the beginning of, and then we pick it up later in the episode, whatever. But before we get there, we have to have a couple more powerful scenes with Skylar, because we already had the powerful Skylar Hank scene. Now we get the Skylar Marie scene. Another interesting scene. Obviously, these two have had some powerful scenes over the last few seasons, but mostly they were dealing with Marie's issues and stuff going on in Marie's life. Whether it was the kleptomania or her trying to deal with Hank, whatever. Now we've shifted. It's Skylar's issues now, and where this goes.
It's the mirroring intervention where Skylar had Marie sit down. It's, Marie, why are you doing this? What's going on? It's the flip of that, like you so expertly said at the start. It's, revisiting all those notes, but from a different angle.
So basically, where we can look at season 5, it's kind of like the Bizarro season, where it's the inverse universe and everything is flipped, and it's mirroring, but it's the reversal. Yeah. I'm watching Superman and Lois. It's actually pretty good. Leave me alone. Anyway, but I like that she because, and again, like Hank initially goes into that conversation with Skylar, believing her to be the victim. And then as it goes on, you realize, oh, maybe she's not. Marie does the same thing here. And then it's the dawning, it's because a lot of it is like, when did Skylar know? That's when she starts piecing it together, just how long Skylar has known and and based on Skylar's reaction, like the fact that she might have whatever level of involvement in all this. It's a really powerful scene. Is this, if I'm remembering correctly, because I didn't write the notes about this, this is the scene that culminates in her trying to leave with the baby, right?
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah, heartbreaking. And I one little tidbit in watched it was she says to Skylar, like she would even take her word over Hank. she's like, tell me he's crazy. Like, because, you know, Hank's been acting erratic and she knows he's had his issues. But she's basically like, just tell me he's talking out his butt. And you have the sense, like, because it's her sister, she'd believe her if she just said that. And Skylar's no Walt. She can't look her in the face and lie as she says these things. And slowly Marie pieces it together. And I think this is where a lot of people, I think, got the idea to hate Skylar, is when Marie says, did you know before Hank was shot? Like that bit of being complicit at a time where Hank was almost killed because all the things going on. But watching it this time, thinking about it, I think, you know, Skylar knew something was going on, but at the time that happened, I don't think she thought people would be coming to kill, you know, Hank. But I mean, you know, it is a dirty world that they were involved in, and so there could have been collateral consequences. But yeah, I mean, amazing scene, and it is to me. It's interesting that Marie goes crazy, and Hank comes in and says, "No, give her back the baby." Like he's the one that comes in and puts the damper on it, and then we get the great scene with Hank and her in the car where she says, "You know, you got to get him," and you know, so yeah, an amazing scene.
It's good stuff, man. Again, much like I was just saying about Skylar, and I've also said this a number of times during this rewatch. One of my favorite things about doing this rewatch is just revisiting and reevaluating my opinions on characters. And again, I had an appreciation for all characters on this show, but I've been consistently impressed with what Betsy Brand actually did on this show, and I don't think I gave her as much credit as I should have back then. I mean, there were certainly moments I did, you know, in a very famous episode that happened that we'll get to next week. But throughout the series, I've gotten a much more of an appreciation. You know, I could see why people might not like her at times, maybe because it sidetracks you from the storylines you really want to focus on, perhaps. But I look at it all as a part of the tapestry, and the fact that, and in a weird way, much like a lot of shows, whether it be this or The Sopranos or whatever else, it all comes down to family after all. So in a weird way, it is kind of as vital a part as anything else, especially when you see how things play out in this final season, since she does play a much bigger role because of she's part of the whole fucking thing. So this is we did go back to seeing Walt doing burying all the money, and you know, and I love the so simple, it's brilliant idea of just of how to remember all the coordinates is memorizing numbers and then putting them on a lottery ticket. That's one of those little writer things. I was like, oh, that's a great little idea. That's great. That's really nice. And I think it's shortly thereafter, because he's obviously been between his cancer treatments and the amount of work he had to do to bury all those barrels the way he did. That's insane. That's just insane. So then we have that moment where he collapses in the bathroom, and I will say I audibly gasped with the sound of his head hitting the floor, and that it's like, oh Jesus, and the old sack of wet cement kind of a sound.
Right, and that made me recall something that we didn't touch on, and that is Hank tells Skylar the cancer's back because Walt had told him that in the garage, and which also could be an explanation for why she changes. Maybe that's what changed her at the diner. I don't know, but you made me think of that. And then, she addresses it with him, and he makes the line, I guess that's what you wanted, or something like that when they talk later. And we talked about that as being, one of the, her badassest moments when she said, I can't wait till the cancer comes back.
Oh yeah, that was one of Skylar's most cutting, might be Skylar's harshest things she's ever said on the show, just about. If not, it's damn close to it. And it's funny then you have Skylar. It's funny oh wow, perfect timing to bring that up, Mr. Bryan, because you can juxtapose the fact that there's a moment not that long ago where she says, I'll just wait for the cancer to come back. And then you have this scene after he's collapsed. And then the fact that the way she's taking care of him in the bathroom. And I mean, the just the way it's shot, the framing of everything. And I kept thinking, I wonder if this scene might have won over some of her haters, because she's obviously supporting her husband, and they're working as one here. I really like that. So we can really change shifts and tones and go to the lady we fortunately Dan remembered to bring up in a previous episode. I can't believe I had skipped over her. Lydia. Oh, Lydia. Have you seen Lydia? First of all, the fact that we see her meeting with Declan. Is that how we pronounce his name?
Yep.
First, I'm enjoying the fact that we're going to get scenes with very side characters that don't feature any of the main players, don't feature any of the main supporting players. We're going to get Lydia and Declan and her fucking shoes. I love the fact that they found it. It's not just that she's wearing the most inappropriate high heel pumps in this area that you can imagine. It's those bright red soles, which are extremely eye catching, and come up with your own metaphor or symbolism, whatever. I don't care. It's just it's extremely noticeable. Those shoes were the wardrobe design. That was done with a purpose, because otherwise it wouldn't have been done that way. And we've had fun with her shoes before, if I recall, because wasn't there the episode where she was all jittery and then she realized she actually left the house wearing two different shoes, which someone noticed. I think Hank or Gomez, one of them noticed. Hank, it must have been Hank, I think. So basically, this scene is all about, bye-bye to the Declan gang and welcome back Uncle Jack. And that's, we realize, that's going to be the storyline. And the smarty pants people out there are probably going, maybe this has something to do with that big gun he got in his trunk, and I probably went, oh, fuck you. You don't know that. But, you guys were right if you did say that. I enjoy the scene. I enjoy her, because we get a little bit of Todd again, too. So, very nice.
Yeah, Declan's kind of an idiot for thinking he can crawl away while bloody and dying with people with guns all around him. I mean, this happens on TV shows all the time. But
it's a trope.
Yeah, nobody will ever play dead. It's just dumb. But well, Declan wasn't the smartest.
Right. I had someone who was like, why wouldn't you just? I mean, were they going around just shooting people anyway? Like the Nazis used to do, actually they are the Nazis, so I guess maybe they were doing that. I don't know. I think I read somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, probably IMDb, I don't remember. Because the way they do the scene is like she goes down into the underground meth lab that they have scored away there, and then we basically hear everything. We just hear the gunfire and screaming, and I think that was a budget issue. So even though it was fucking cool and it was nice that they did it that way. The reason why they did it that way wasn't because they thought it was going to be cool, even though it turned out that way. It's like, yeah, actually shooting the shooting is going to cost us more money. This is a cheaper way to go about it. So and Breaking Bad, much like the aforementioned Mad Men, I've said time and time again, it's two shows that always had budget limitations, and they found their ways to work around them, and you were never aware of it when you watched either show. They looked as, they looked like they were like multi-million-dollar budgeted episodes of television, and neither of them were. And so let's shift back to Hank and Marie. And I think what I loved about this little scene between the two of them it finally, if I'm not mistaken, you can please correct me if it got said before this. I think this is the first time, now that Hank knows, of course, that it's acknowledged that the fact that it's Walt, no matter what he does, his career is over. Your brother-in-law is the biggest drug crime kingpin of all time. And then and then correct me if I'm wrong, is this the scene where is it this episode or is it the next episode? I don't have my notes in front of me. With the medical bills. Is it the next episode? Or this episode? Brian, do you remember? Dan? Anybody?
I think it was the next one.
It's the next episode.
But maybe after the fake the confession tape or whatever, maybe.
Right, that's right. Thank you. Okay. I apologize to our listeners. I went off script in my mind. I just couldn't remember. But he does say when this case is brought in, it's going to be the last day of his career, because there is acknowledgement, even without, he doesn't even know about that as of yet. Once he knows that, then it's really, forget it. But, I really kind of like that, because that's one of the things I kept thinking all along, but way back when, like, Hank ever finds out, what is Hank going to do? Because he's kind of screwed. And now this is where he actually acknowledges that. And of course, then we do get to the end of the episode where Jesse has been apprehended, for, I guess, giving away, throwing out millions of dollars. And it's those two feds that we saw back in season 4 with the whole Ryson scare with Brock at the hospital, whatever. I always liked those two actors. One of them I always recognized, like, oh, that guy was the stupid correctional officer in Oz for like a couple seasons, and I believe he gets killed because everybody gets killed on Oz. Didn't they slice his Achilles when he was playing basketball on Oz, if I'm not mistaken? Anyway, but Jesse again, whereas last time he was with these guys, Jesse might have been a bit of a smartass. Jesse's still in that zoned out mode where he's not saying pretty much of anything. And that's when Hank shows up and he's outside. And I believe we end the episode with him about to entering the room with Jesse. And we have to wait till the next episode to see how that scene unfolds. So we'll move on to the 11th episode, which is Confessions. This one I always remembered being quite the doozy. This was directed by Michael Slovis, and it was written by Jennifer Hutchison. She's so good. First we get that diner scene with Todd and his Uncle Jack, and I had to look up his name in the show. It's Kenny. Basically, it's our little Friday Night Lights reunion of a couple actors there. It's after that, Todd leaves Walt that little message about there being a change in management. So, but the diner scene, couple questions, and the questions I think I know the answer to, but I'm going to throw them out there anyway. So number one, because obviously Todd is retelling the story of what had happened before, like with the freight train or whatever. Does he not tell about the kid? Or do you think he tells them about the kid?
I don't know if he would say it in front of Kenny. I would think he would. But if it was just him and Uncle Jack, he would definitely say it, because Uncle Jack doesn't care.
Interesting. See, I thought about it, and I kept thinking, because obviously, these are the Nazi guys, these are the neo-Nazi guys, these are the guys who are killers. Wouldn't you think Todd would want to try to impress him, not just with the fact of Mr. White's plan, but the fact that the one possible glitch he took it upon himself to take care of, and he could be as cold-blooded as take out a kid? Or do we think, they would frown upon killing a kid, maybe because it was a white kid or something? I don't know. I was just curious about it. But because you notice in that scene, if anyone had forgotten or somehow didn't realize before, they really focus on that swastika on by I think it's by Uncle Jack's throat or neck or same thing, whatever. They really make sure you don't miss that. And then there's a very interesting thing that happens in the scene. I thought. Did you notice? Did it seem like these guys had not really ever been around a woman before? The way they act with the waitress is very odd. And I went back and I remember I watched it. It was like, okay, it wasn't like they were at that, well, I didn't get the impression it was, oh, we need to be quiet because we're talking about some really, whatever, nasty shit here. We don't want a witness to hear it. That's not the way that scene played. It's a woman, and you start thinking, okay, well, first of all, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that these guys have done some time. I think that's a fair assumption. So the combination of having served time and also, well, the kind of people that they are, I'm wondering if women tend to be more the higher type or the occasional, I guess, there are Nazi chicks, of course, but I don't recall ever seeing any around them when we see them later on in the season. It was very telling, and it's also telling because of the way Todd himself, as we're going to see the way he's going to be around Lydia as in later episodes. It's kind of like apple tree. I know he's an uncle, not a father, but do they
major incel energy from Todd, and I think you're right. Like it's not like, hey, we've been caught talking. It's like there's discomfort in the physical proximity of a woman to them. I think you're right. Like, and we know they've done enough time that they've cultivated contacts to take out people at the prisons all over. So, I think you're spot on.
By the way, just thought of it because we're dealing with his Uncle Jack and all these other. Do we ever get an explanation? Not that necessarily has to be an explanation. Probably doesn't. It's not like he's not a kid. He's obviously at least. I'm guessing Todd is at least somewhere in his 20s, or supposed to be. We don't get any explanation about anything about Todd's actual family, though. Mother, father. Do they ever drop any facts about that? I don't recall.
I don't think so.
Okay, just curious. Just wondering if they have similar affiliations like Uncle Jack or not, or how that whole thing worked out. So, what do I have next? We have Hank and the Hank and Jesse scene, and then Saul shows up. Oh well, again, mirroring. We've been down this road before. Everything from Saul coming in to that very room, and also ushering Hank out of a room before. We've seen that happen before, but again, it's the Bizarro universe. So this isn't the same kind of Jesse with Saul that we've seen before. It's your typical really good Saul Goodman, Jesse scene, whatever. Obviously, Saul is doing he's always going to do most of the talking. He's pretty much practically doing all the talking in this scene. But how do you not enjoy it? However, I do have to point this out. Am I the only one who, now that we're in season 5, or in the second half of season 5 especially, it feels really weird to me watching these Saul Goodman scenes and where we are in Better Call Saul. Because even though obviously the transformation there, we are getting to, he's on the precipice of the whole Saul Goodman thing, especially since the ads that we've been seeing, whatever. But he's nowhere near this to me right now. And it's making me look forward to that final season of Better Call Saul, certainly. But it's kind of weird to see these, because that's so fresh in my mind. And now you're seeing this. It's like, oh, wow. Now I know why people were initially questioning the idea of doing a Better Call Saul spinoff, because really? And then you realize, no, Gilligan and Gould had something in mind. Like, no, we're going to show you how we get here. Much like you probably couldn't have started Breaking Bad with him as Heisenberg, but you had to get there. And it's realized, those bastards have done it again. It's really nice.
No, his absolute control of the room, reading the situations, merging, let's say, the law at the margins with people like Walt and Jesse. I mean, like he goes in and basically does what he can to get Jesse out of there, is throwing lawsuit threats and, I'll sue you for what you've done to my client. He's a completely assured person who knows what he's doing and what he's trying to accomplish in a way that we haven't seen. And the ends he's trying to achieve in this show are, much more nefarious. And it is kind of jarring to see him be this person. And it's kind of awesome, like in a way that Saul's not.
Well, when you consider, even though we have to go back to season 3, but even the season 3 one felt a little bit more innocent. I don't know how suggesting murder would be innocent, but it almost felt that way compared to the way he is now. But it's also the infection of Walter White has had that kind of impact on him, because even he has changed to some extent, maybe slightly, over the course of this series from where we saw him, when they first encountered him back in season 2. Although he still has a lot of funny lines, he's certainly not quite as light a character as he might have been back then. And that's really because of Walt and maybe even Jesse. And also Mike trying to break his legs, I guess there was that. So
it does make me think of like when Kim first talks to him about engaging cartel clients, what that entails. And, from what we've seen, we haven't seen the conclusion of it yet, but we see the people he starts to deal with. I mean, we eventually end up with Gus Fring, who is, way up the food chain. And then we see Walt, who has, taken over the market in the Southwest for manufacturing, and he even went international. I mean, the Mess International at this point with Lydia, that, the warning Kim gives him about where this will lead is where he ends up at the end of the show. And that it's interesting to see even the bad guys are menacing and scary in Better Call Saul, but, where it gets to in Breaking Bad is almost, like the Premier League of bad guys. And he's able to work in that world now by the end of Breaking Bad.
Right. Absolutely. So let's flip back to, we have that scene where, Junior, who definitely has a much, as we get these later episodes, definitely has much more of a presence in this back half, which again goes to the family thing. Why has he been doing this all along? Although we find that really wasn't the case, but blah, blah, blah. But Junior is about to go help, Aunt Maria. I think she's like me with computers, apparently. And that is when, inside joke. And I think it's at that point where Walt stops him. And he stops him and he tells him about his cancer returning. And one of the results of that conversation is that Junior decides to stay. Now, I know the answer, but I know what one of you will say, so I'm just going to confirm it. Walt sets out to tell the whole purpose of Walt setting out to tell him about the cancer is because he knows full well once he tells him that he's not going to go there, he's going to stay, right? That's why he's doing it. Correct? If you shake your head, it's a podcast.
I think so.
God, if we ever did a video cast, it would be so bizarre. Alrighty. So, speaking of Marie, then, we go to Hank and Marie, and that's when we find out that he hasn't told the DEA yet, and we get that little scene between them. There's something, again, this may be more of a technical thing, and I don't know if anyone else noticed this, or maybe everybody noticed it. Maybe it's just me. Did you notice we have that scene with Hank and Marie? Again, that's where we get the lowdown on what's going on with them. And then we cut to Walt and Skyler. But it's not the kind of cut they do on Breaking Bad. I've never seen them do, at least to my knowledge. Maybe I'm probably making more of this than I should. I don't know.
No, I know what you're talking about, and it's jarring.
They do this weird quicker. I wrote it. I just my notes here. I'm like quicker cut than normal to WS. So I was like, yeah, it's almost trying to like it's almost it's virtually a smash cut. It's like bang. I was like, wait, what? And I think it's done. Well, obviously there's a certain. It is a jarring thing. It is unsettling, and especially because we don't know yet what this is about, and then we see what's about to unfold in that scene. And we still don't know exactly what it is. In fact, it's the classic little red herring kind of a thing. Like, oh, it's a confession? Oh, I know some of us might, if we looked on our DVR or I was going to say TV guide. People who are still using TV guide probably weren't watching Breaking Bad, quite frankly. Watch cable. I think it just adds to both the immediacy of, okay, this is, we're going to have to put this plan into action. And this is like the doomsday plan. And I think it's just, because everything about it is just unsettling. And especially, and then once we get to it, it's slowed down. How he's when we begin, it's methodical and slow. And then we cut away from it. And anyone who doesn't understand how important editing is, it's one of the most important things in filmmaking. It's not noticed sometimes as much in some television series, but some you can pick up on it. And this is one of the times where it's very noteworthy here. Because that's pure editing, how they make that moment happen. So I really thought it was significant enough for me to spend 2 minutes talking about. So.
Well, it's one of those things that is great about this show. It sends you into a jarring moment, and there's been a gap, and you're not sure what's happening. And what starts to unfold, you figure out, but they don't show the conversation and the plan that preceded it.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Again, you used the phrase that before that I use probably too often sometimes in certain meetings or whatever, about the economy of storytelling. And one of the purposes of that is like, no, it's by not showing all your cards, you also build suspense and you have nice surprising payoffs, which is what they do in this episode. Now, I got to tell you, I don't know how you guys felt when you were watching it, but I haven't seen this episode in whatever it is, 10 years, whatever. And that's when I realized, oh man, this is the guacamole episode. The tableside guacamole episode. Oh, I forgot. Oh, I remember this one. I got all smiley. and that's when I realized, tableside guacamole really isn't that big a deal. It'd be like going to an Italian restaurant, like, and we make pizza with crusts. Like, really? Wow. Maybe if we crustless pizza, that would be unique. So that table, I don't know if there. I mean, it's funny. We've watched this show. We've seen the previous 50 odd episodes of this series or whatever it was at this point. So we've seen meetings between characters. We've seen the Salamancas and the Gus Frings and the cartels and the this and the that and whoever. I'm going to say there's more seething hate at this little table in this Mexican restaurant than we've seen in those scenes. Maybe, with the exception of Hector. Hector is hate embodied. Perhaps, maybe not Hector. But, my God, this is such a great fucking scene. It's so satisfying on so many levels. And I love that this is a scene where it feels like the lines in the sand are drawn. Like, oh no, hey, Marie, Hank, you thought, wait, she's not the victim? Wait, it's like, no. It's these two and it's you two. It's so good. Is there not also a moment where, Marie basically picks up the gauntlet that Skylar had tossed in, that earlier episode that we referenced before about waiting for him to die. Does she not say something along the lines like, well, why, you could just die or something like that?
Yeah. She says something like, "Why don't you die already?" or something along those lines. But I think what's interesting about this scene to me is we always see these people in their homes. Like, to see them out at a restaurant is really sort of disconcerting, and that like the most uncivil thing that could happen is happening in a public place and not behind closed doors is really interesting to the way it could go, the way it does go, the sort of subtle menace that plays through the whole thing. And to see there's a clear, like you say, I mean, even the way it's shot, like, the teams are set, they're at odds, and it's happening in this completely public place, which sort of adds some tension to it.
And you gotta love the kid who keeps coming over to the table. Love him.
The annoying waiter who always says, "Everything okay when your mouth's full?"
I mean, it's just so good. It's so good. I'm just going to check something. I think this is the episode. Yeah, this is the episode where she switches from purple to black, by the way. Because when she's at that table, she's wearing black. So this is the episode where, from this point on, Marie wears black. I know everyone was really hanging on the edge of their seat, trying to figure that out. So I told you. So we go from here and we go to, after they've been given that disc, we get to the quote unquote, the confession. And that's when we see what the plan was, which it's one of those things. Once they're watching the disc, and the moment Walt says the first lie about Hank, we're like, of course this is what he's going to do. It's so logical. It almost feels like this was like a built-in escape hatch from the get-go. It's like, well, if anything ever goes wrong with this, and we get, Hank's gonna take the fall right along with us. And yeah, you're right. What you were saying. Now I'm remembering. It's after after they've watched the thing. That's when when Hank finally finds out about how his medical bills were actually covered. That's also when we find out the actual number that was covered. $177,000. Kind of, and because it's one of those things where then if he tries to explain it to someone else, like, so wait a minute, you were told this was gambling winnings, that it was like a Rain Man kind of a thing. It's one of those things when you said, like, that sounds ridiculous. Wouldn't you have looked into this? It's not good for Hank. It's not good.
No, but the beauty of it is that it worked out perfectly for Walter. But the Heisenberg that he is now, all the things he does and says, like he couldn't have done it any better if he had been planning it from the beginning to set Hank up. Now, obviously, he wants to get away with it and not get caught. But the closeness that Hank and Walt had and their families had, and the blindness Hank had, led him down the path. But you couldn't have designed a better trap to take Hank down with you.
Right. It's basically it's the old mutual assured destruction.
Oh yeah.
You take me down, you're going down too, and I'm doing away. It's not just going to be you're going to lose your job. You're going to be serving time as well. Because how are you going to explain this away? How big a moron do you want them to believe you to be? Would they believe you to be? Whatever. So yeah, it's genius.
And in a weird way, Walt is in the best position of all four, because if he checks out and dies, they're all still left holding the bag to have to deal with the consequences.
Oh yeah. It's all about consequences. So. Then we have Saul bringing Jesse to the middle of the desert to meet Walt. It's interesting that this is where they choose, where the choice of where they choose to meet. Because usually all the ominous meetings happen in the desert when it's, it's a big showdown. Obviously the Declan thing was, the rival and trying to convince him having to do the whole Heisenberg, say my name, whatever. But before that, who's the one who always met people in the desert for a conversation? Gus Fring. Why he does it with Declan is because, he's taken over. He's assumed that position. And the fact that you have Mike behind him is it's kind of like the way he was with Fring, although Mike didn't see it that way, of course. So the fact that's what's happening here. And this is a great scene. I feel redundant saying that about Breaking Bad. There's not that many, it's kind of a shitty scene. But this is a really powerful scene because it's, yes, once again, we have Walt spinning his lies or his manipulations. But now it's Jesse's fighting back. And this isn't Jesse on the couch. This is Jesse's had it. And I program in my head, I think about Jesse and Walt in those first couple episodes of season 1, and then seeing them here and the way this scene plays out is just it's so striking. And and one of the most interesting thing about it, beyond the words that are spoken and how that will move the plot forward, is the decision. And if I'm not mistaken, this is where the hug happens, right? When he falls into his, that's such a great, fascinating decision to make here. It's this, something which is, typically about intimacy and about caring. And I genuinely believe, despite his clear shortcomings and his Machiavellian ways and whatever, I don't view Walt as a sociopath, quite frankly. And I believe he does truly care about Jesse. At least he still does right now. I think I was very struck by it. I think it's really powerful stuff.
And I think the flip side of that is, if you're Jesse, after all you've been through with Walt, you may hate him, but there is still a lot in common. There's always that hope that maybe, when they hug, maybe Walt's trying to feel something. And, when Jesse is sort of broken, like maybe there's a small part of Jesse that hopes that Walt will remember what they were and who he was. And there's just the thing that reeks to me of that scene is it just reeks of desperation from Jesse. Like, he has had it and he's pissed, but it's like he just doesn't know what else to do because, like, this guy has ruined everything, but he still respects him. And he just can't believe where they are from where they started.
Right. And again, it's just been a fucking year.
Yeah.
Because wow, Jesse, you've aged a lot in a year. Oh, anyway, so
and to continue my theme that I've said, so this season is the season. First season, Walt is right, Jesse's the dumbass, right? This season, the plans, the things that have gone on, the person that's hit the nail on the head the whole season is Jesse.
Mm. Yep. I'll give you that. One thing. I'm just kidding. Now, it's funny. I mentioned before about how important editing is and, and how the economy of storytelling and so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. So it's interesting from whatever stance you want to take, director's perspective, writer's perspective, I don't know, critic perspective, why they bother. There's a couple scenes that follow this. And I looked at them as being very odd, minor, short, fragmented scenes. And again, I don't necessarily want to spend that much time talking about them, but I don't want to just ignore them either because I felt there's something very unusual about them. And I feel like it's almost like these scenes are here to set the tone for these characters and where they are and where we're going with them. And the two scenes I'm referring to refresh any listeners' memories, is number one, you have the scene, this moment. It's really just a moment of Skylar at the car wash, and Walt is there too. But she's definitely in let's call it, she's in the sad zone. It's that version of Skylar, and it's because of what they just did with the disc and whatever. But there's nothing really much more to that scene other than Skylar's sad. And then we switch over to Hank, and then Hank interacting with Gomi, whatever. And Hank is also in a bit of a zone as well. Again, it is all the after effect of what that confession video has affected, how it affected Skylar, who is the one, behind the camera, so to speak, and how it's affected Hank. And which, need we say more? It's kind of obvious how it would affect Hank, whatever. But it's almost like little, instead of an entire piece of music, it's just this discordant chords that we're going to pop in here just to, this is where Skylar is now. This is where Hank is now. You know what we need to do? We didn't give you much Jesse last episode. We need to get back to him because that's what this is really going to be about in a second.
Yeah, and isn't this the episode where Jesse puts two and two together about the ricin cigarette with Saul?
That's what's about to happen. Yep.
Yeah, and so, it's really like giving Jesse is basically like Hank. He's putting all the pieces about Walt together that he's figured out who he became totally by the end of this.
Right. Because it's interesting because with Jesse is initially at Saul's, and he's going to use the vacuum cleaner dude, the disappearer. He's going to go to Alaska. Oh, here we go. And yeah, it's when he's waiting. He has it's just him looking at the cigarettes, and when he's patting his pockets, and that's when the realization hits him. Because he was a pickpocket and because he realized the ease of how that could have happened as far as that rice and cigarette. And that's when he goes back to Saul and beats the crap out of Saul, which, and then Saul makes a call. Go on.
Which this is a joke, but I think it's funny, which is, mirroring in that in the past, Jesse always got the crap beat out of him, but this time he's beating the crap out of someone else. How much did we watch Jesse get beat up early in this show?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, we know all of us who have watched the show already, don't worry. Jesse's about to get the shit beaten out of him for the rest of the show's run anyway. Oh, my God. So, yeah, so Saul makes that call, and then okay, I got a question because I didn't want to go back and look. We get the frozen gun in the car wash Coke machine, which sounds like a version of the frozen donkey wheel or something. I don't know. Wow. Had we seen Walt put the gun there before? Or was that just the first time we discover he hid a gun in the bottom of a Coke machine for some reason? So apparently the distributor never comes and loads the machine. It's always them, which makes sense because they keep showing them with all the cans anyway. But I always found that kind of interesting. It's like, it's interesting because sometimes it's the distributor does that, but I guess with some businesses do it themselves. I do know that happens as well. So I'm not saying it's a flaw. I just thought that was interesting.
I don't remember the gun being stashed.
Maybe so. Dan, maybe it's like the opposite of Chekhov's gun or something.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Maybe it's Sulu's gun. And it's from that episode where he's freezing on the planet. So it's anyway.
That's the enemy within.
So it's my favorite. I know everyone goes to the one where he's running around with the sword and or the mirror, but my favorite Sulu is Sulu freezing. Of course, and then the episode is Jesse's is just looking to burn it all down, and by burn it down I mean the White House hold, and that's where we end the episode with him splashing gasoline all over the place.
One thing I realized this time around is that if Hank doesn't find the book at Walt's place, Jesse burns the house down. Like, that's the only thing that stopped that from happening, because like Jesse's meltdown exists like separate from the other stuff that's going on. So if it isn't for Hank like following Jesse around, like, you know, that situation goes to shit, you know, anyway. I mean, their house gets burnt down, period.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. You're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of it that way. Oh, I should mention, because I always do this. This episode is actually the episode that Aaron Paul submitted to the Emmys for the Best Supporting Actor, and yes, this is the one that he won for, and it was his third Emmy for playing Jesse. Also ripping off the trivia that I looked up about the episode, because that's what I do, because I'm a big plagiarist, apparently. Other than the thing I mentioned with Marie and her shifting her color scheme, one could be silly and point out the fact that the clothing that you see that Jesse has on in this episode, this is what Jesse is going to be wearing for the rest of Jesse's existence in the Breaking Bad universe, as far as we know. This is what he's going to be wearing for the rest of the season. And when they find him, you know, whatever, several months later with Todd and all of them, and in El Camino, this is the outfit he's wearing. So for people who really care about, you know, the Breaking Bad universe wardrobe, that now you know. I love that I always see the top of your head flying, but I love the nod. No, I enjoy it. Just watching your eyebrows just kind of agree with me. Like, yes. Salient point there, sir.
I do agree with you. You are correct, sir.
That's not even an opinion. It's a fact.
My stupid camera keeps, like, works its way up, and I have to keep pulling it down, so it's kind of annoying.
Oh, I enjoy it. It because just so folks know, because you know, in fact, if they haven't picked up on it, so the last few times we've been recording, I've taken to actually putting on the video part, so we can actually I can see some of the people who are on the podcast with us. So with Brian's camera, he basically, it's like the old Kilroy was here kind of thing. So it's just usually just the top of his eyes. It reminds me when I look at my reflection in the window when I'm at the gym on the treadmill, and at certain positions, it's just like the top of my big fat head and my eyes looking over, and then I get taken with how beautiful that looks. Anyway, so I hate myself, but it's a nice shot. I wish this is a movie, so I can't see the rest of me. Let's move on to the next episode. Next episode, the 12th episode of the 5th and final season of Breaking Bad, which is Rabid Dog. This was written and directed by Sam Caitlin. And I believe we kick off the episode. Oh yes, that's right. We kick off this episode with Walt going into the house, because we see that he pulled up and he sees the Saul's car outside. He knows, he's putting two and two together. He goes in, but there's no Jesse, just a lot of gas. And that's where this is the one that leads to the story with Skyler and Junior there. Walt's story about the pump malfunction. The question is, okay, yes, Skyler's bullshit meter, goes off. She knows that he's lying. It's clear she knows he's lying. I'm watching it and I'm thinking, would a normal person be convinced by this? Because even his son's not buying it, So I'm just like, again, it's like, does he need to take on the Heisenberg persona in order to be a better liar? It's very confusing. All right. But that's not, you know what? I'm going to skip past that because I don't care about that. I care about Walt with Saul and QB, and they're talking about the search for Jesse, and and now I guess they listening in at Badger's house, and I forgot, it's not just that he overhears them talking about Babylon 5, it's a 3-hour conversation about Babylon 5. And you know what? I like Babylon 5.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say it, because if we'd ever done a podcast about it, considering how long our podcast tend to be, I probably could do 3 hours on Babylon 5. not the one. Anyway, I'm dropping all these Easter eggs for people who, Frozen Donkey, not the one. Anyway, all these shows get referenced on our podcast. I can't blame the person who usually does it. Now it's me doing it. So, I wrote a note that makes no sense. So maybe someone can help me with this. I wrote Walt and Skylar in the Vital room. Vital? Oh, hotel. Oh my God. Okay. Wow.
I can't read the notes either.
I was gonna say, man, like you stumped us with the Vital room. That's
oh my
solid.
God. Hotel room. Why? I don't understand. How did... It's got a T in it. Wow. It's a good thing I don't play that Wordle, because that was... Anyway.
Big fail.
Oh my God. Anyway, it's the hotel room scene. And that's the thing I mentioned before, and it bears repeating because that's what we do here. I think it's very interesting that, much like Saul, Skylar is clearly floating the idea that they need to kill Jesse. No, she's not an innocent victim anymore. Come on.
No, she basically says like it has to be done. Like we got to protect our family. He's brought a threat to the house.
Yeah, exactly. And I looked at the county here. It's 21 minutes into the episode. That's when we peel back the clock and we discover what happened when Jesse first arrived at the White household, when he's about to torch the whole joint. And that's when Hank shows up, and we get that nice little scene between them and the pain that Jesse's in. When he's screeching how he can't keep getting away with it. And that's, and Hank is trying to be the calming presence, which is interesting because we know it's not really a mirroring thing, but usually when these two, get into any sort of scene together, Hank tends to be more the aggressor, but that's where he it's an obvious line, but I'll forgive it because hell, I would have put it there too. Let's burn them down together. Yeah, it's very nice. Reminds me of has anyone seen Australian Survivor out there? That's the kind of line they use in that. Anyway, it's so good. And then we see that Walt shows up a minute later. Less than a minute later, actually, in TV time. It's like, it's one of those what if kind of moments, whatever. It's interesting that usually when we get firsts, it's usually, season 1 stuff, season 2 stuff, maybe when you introduce new characters in 3 or 4, whatever. We get a first in the back half of the final season of Breaking Bad. We have heard about it a number of times. We finally see Marie in therapy. The first time we've seen her actually in therapy. I love the idea that she's basically doing the thing where she keeps talking about something that she doesn't want to talk about. She keeps bringing it up. Oh, but I can't talk about it. But she keeps saying these things. They're increasingly horrible, ominous things. What? And then he brings it back to like stuff at her office. Like, dude, did you hear what she's saying? I love the fact they decided, because do you need that scene? No. But is it just an amazing scene just to pop in there? Yeah. Because I also like the fact that when you have any number of shows that really revolve around a very, short list of characters, because Breaking Bad is not like, The Wire or The Sopranos or whatever, where you've got, it feels like you've got like 20 characters that you're juggling storylines between at times. But one of the issues I sometimes have, and I have to put it out of my mind for, it's fiction, is when you seem to only have like these 5 or 6 characters who don't really seem to interact with anybody else outside of each other. Other than maybe, Hank in Alyssa in the workplace or something. But other than that, they don't seem to have outside friends or do this or that, whatever. So I like whenever you introduce something else into it. And Marie clearly needs someone else to talk to. So I love that they say, hey, you know what? she has a therapist. We've mentioned it a number of times. Let's see how that plays. And I really like that because we could easily spend all our time focusing on how Hank is dealing with this and how Skylar is dealing with this. I like that they gave Marie a moment outside of Hank, just with a therapist, and realizing that, but she can't talk to the therapist about it. I mean, actually, she could, I think, but she chooses not to. But I just enjoy the fact that they stuck that in there.
I like it a lot, and this show does a great job of like this. A lot of this episode's really heavy, and a lot of the back end is really heavy, and like the Badger thing with Star Trek and the things. This show does a great job of sometimes it just gives you a moment to breathe. And this scene gives you a moment to breathe, and that you do feel for Marie, but there's a little bit of dark comedy to it that, like you say, like you're laughing at, that you kind of get a momentary pressure relief to just sort of laughing at that. She has all the quirks of Marie we've seen for years, right? Like the chattiness, the wanting to be in people's business. And now like she can't get into her own business and she can't talk about it. And it's darkly comic and gives you a moment to breathe while still not making a joke out of her. And I think that it's well done that way.
It's done. It's interesting. If we'd had a scene like with Marie like this, maybe 3 seasons earlier, I think it would have been played more for the comic nature of it. It's not that we didn't have her serious moments tend to be between her and her sister, if any. But here it's giving her again. I think we just appreciate when they give people like Dean Norris and Betsy Brant really good dramatic material to sink their teeth in, as opposed to the comic relief they seem to they provided more way back in season 1, quite frankly. And continuing with Marie and how it really putting a nice little exclamation point on all this. Because after therapy, she comes home and Hank's already like packed a bag for her because he's trying to get her out the door. Go to the spa, whatever. And then he has to, she realizes there's someone there, has to admit they have a guest. And then we see who the guest is. And I love it. Basically, it's like, is it bad for Walt? I'm staying. It's lasagna time. And that's when we discover, because we're playing with time here, we've round the clock back. It's at this point in time is when Walt leaves a message for Jesse that we had seen him trying to call and leave a message for him earlier in the episode. Just didn't mention it because we're not giving you a rundown of every single goddamn thing that happens on the episode.
It is great that Marie, unlike Skylar, tends to sort of know when Hank's lying. And most of the time doesn't call him on it or just lets it go. But she sees through this immediately and is like, she's all in because she wants to bust him. Like their relationship, Hank's not as good a liar as Walt is. And she's more clued in to her husband than probably Skylar was to Walt.
At a certain stage, but like in the scene that was in the hotel, in the Vital hotel room, apparently. Vital. That was, I believe that's the scene where Skylar says, "Yeah, I know you're full of shit with the pump malfunction story. Tell me what." And that's where. And then again, Walt is having a more true confession. He's confessing what's actually going on with Jesse and the whole situation. And which leads to another vote for Belize, shall we say?
Which leads me to an interesting question, and I'd be curious your all's thoughts on this, because that leads me to wonder, what if Walt had been honest with Skylar from the beginning?
We have a very different show.
No, but what if he said, like, I can't afford to pay this. I'm going to make meth. And it's possible. Is it possible, like, there's a way this goes where he doesn't at least hurt the people around him, or they devise something. And he goes down this path and is even more successful with her help because she can be pretty formidable.
Well, I think the problem would be the money from Gretchen and Elliot that he refused to take. I mean, it's kind of like hard to imagine Skylar just like, why the fuck would you do that?
Yeah, that's the issue. Like, so let me get straight. You can't get past your pride and take money from these people because of how you feel they wronged you or whatever, and you don't want to be taking charity or handouts or whatever, but you want to commit an ongoing crime that actually also even damages and hurts people down the road because a drug is a drug, whatever. I think she would do whatever she could to prevent him from doing it. So I don't think she would go along with it. If that's that version of Skylar, I don't think would go along with this. The woman's selling, pieces of shit on eBay. Come on. So, while she's jerking, anyway. That was such a sexy episode. I remember that now. So, speaking of that hotel I mentioned, so we switched back. So I believe Walt picked that hotel simply because there'd be a pool there. Because there's one thing that Walt likes doing. He likes sitting by pools. It's like, hey, man, guys, just make sure it needs to be a night scene. We need to light that sucker so it's blue because, we don't want anyone to forget the whole blue thing. Like, oh, I wonder what that's supposed to represent. Yeah, we all know. Duh. But Junior joins them. And when we get hugs. I'm oddly touched by the scenes between Walt and Junior, even though some of it, because yes, I do. Obviously, his cancer revelation to his son was was motivated in the moment to keep him from going to Aunt Marie, but he didn't want to. But he also didn't want to tell his son he had cancer again because he knew his son was going to would become a nervous wreck and be worried about him again the way he was before. I think I'm not trying to assign that much nobility to Walt on this one. So there's no but at least he's still a dad. I don't doubt, and I don't doubt that he cares and loves his children. That's why I say he might be he may very well be a quote unquote a bad guy. He's Heisenberg and all and the reasons that people abandon him, or I shouldn't say abandon him, but start to root against him from season to season, depending where they drew the line. There's totally valid, totally understandable, totally I get it. Most people I know are like that, and even I'm like that, for certain things that happened earlier this season. But the thing I always what makes Walt so much more interesting than all the other characters who are interesting themselves is that he's like I said, he's not a sociopath, he's not a psychopath, he's none of those things. And I think he's so twisted in himself of his motivations and why he has done things. And yes, we all know it's about his ego and his pride have gotten in the way, which is basically, that's a classic character thing. It's always, that's why you have the phrase pride goes before the fall. Pride is always what takes people down, be them great or horrible. That's usually, he's just one of the most overt examples that we've ever seen in fiction, at least of the last 25 years. I don't know if it necessarily makes him a bad person, but I think there are still elements of him that are still a good person. I still defend the guy. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
In my mind, he's a wounded narcissist who finally got enough to right some of the wrongs of his past. And, I think about this a lot in terms of what I do and a lot of people charged with crimes and jail. And if you ever look on the news, whenever there's, like, for instance, the Supreme Court nomination and all the grandstanding about saying Judge Brown is pro-criminal, like criminals, quote unquote, are people, and people are complicated, and people are deeper than one thing or something they did. And I would cast a judgmental eye towards anyone that watches this whole show and says, I hate him. I wish like he would die. He's this, he's that. Like, if that's true, if you really feel there's nothing at all redeeming about him and you watched this whole journey and that's what you took of it, then you're a torture porn person who watched the whole thing and got off on somebody doing bad stuff to sit in judgment of them. People are more complicated than that. And his journey, while he does a lot of bad stuff and we may not ultimately like him, he did do some stuff that wasn't just about him or just about doing other stuff. He could have brought a lot of harm to the people sooner. He could have done damage to the people closer to him more than he did. He did do damage to him, but he could have cut them loose and said, I don't need a family. I'm going to go live a different life. And, it's a complicated question. And I think watching their relationship, that's all a big preamble to say as a dad. The difference between Walt Jr. and Holly is Holly's not going to remember him. She's too young. And he, on some level, he can take the solace of saying, at least my daughter won't remember me this way. Like people can tell her about me, but my son will forever remember me this way. Like if I'm caught, and I will have hurt him, and how our relationship could never be prepared, and I will have hurt him for the rest of his life. And I think that's why that relationship is poignant. The loss of Holly is a loss peculiar to Walt. The Walt Jr. is it's damage to both of them in a different way. Now, certainly it's not going to help Holly that her mom's, living under suspicion that her dad died and when she grows up. But I'm not saying her life would be better, but she won't have that indelible memory of her dad taking a knife to her mom or her mom taking a knife to her dad the way Walt Jr. does. And so I think that's why their relationship is so tragic and poignant.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't resist it.
Hey, you were my personal Dan there.
I know.
Good job, Dan.
Yes. So I like the with all this, it's so perfect. All this talk about Walt and good person, bad person, whatever, and and even with all what we both said, it's still barely scratching the surface because there really, I mean, look, with Walt, there really is. I don't know if there really is any wrong answers. I mean, although I'm always a fan, never a fan of people who say, there's no such thing as a wrong opinion, because oh no, that's not true at all. There are plenty of wrong opinions, I believe that guy named Hitler had a whole bunch of opinions that we probably don't agree with. Anyway, but it's funny we were talking about, being a good person. So jumping back into the episode, that's when Jesse wakes up. And one of the first things he sees is that photograph of Skylar and Walt dressed up as Santa Claus, which has to be a bit of a jarring thing for him to see at that moment. I love that they did that, because it could have just been just any picture of like Skylar and Walt. Like, no. We're going to dress him in an outfit, the epitome of Christian goodness. It's Santa Claus. And then of course, I love and this is the scene where you start, keep your eyes open for little details that they have fun with, while Marie spots him and says, and quite unlike the way she would have reacted to Jesse in the past, she's like, offers him a cup of coffee. I love the fact the cup, the mug, it says DEA on it. But the way it looks in his hand, because of the handle, where the handle is, it looks like it says dead. And I'm like, oh my God, they're doing more foreshadowing. I love it. Wait, but except he doesn't, but so close to it. And with all the cool stuff that Hank has on his shoulder, I can't believe I'm going to say something slightly political here. But of course, Hank also has to have a book all about Reagan because I see the book because I think that's the book that Jesse picks up. It's Dutch, which I believe is a Reagan biography, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That I did not look at that. That was still in my head. And you realize that they're setting up for a recording. And it's not, not quite like the recording that Walt did. What I like about what they do here, we are spared the details of what we already know. We don't need this. We don't need to sit through any of that. Of course, we know. You know what it is? It's what we've been watching for the last 50 something episodes. It's kind of like, when, it's like in The Shield when Vic Mackey is, Dan, we know we've talked about this before, when he's doing the tape recording, it was part of our opening way back when, like, how much room you got on that tape or how many tapes you got. We don't sit through everything that most of anything Vic says because we just spent the last several seasons seeing all the horrible shit he did. That's what we don't need to hear all the stuff that happened between Jesse and Walt, whatever. How it kicks in is when we see Hank and Gomi reacting after on the terrace. And I remember in that moment I was thinking, did Jesse really just tell them everything? And I had to stop and think about it for a second. Not really like the Todd thing we mentioned before, because if Jesse's telling them everything, well, that means Jesse's telling them that he shot Gail Boddicker. I think I'm pretty sure he tells him, right? He has to tell him, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know because you know what? Because I know because they don't reference it, but later Hank refers to him as a junkie murderer, and that would be the murder that would be on his ledger as far as Hank is concerned. Which he's right. He was a junkie and he's a murderer.
Well, I think he tells everything because we've had two confessions. One is Walt saying what he did and why I'm blaming it. I think for Jesse and the way he's felt and the journey he's on, his confession is like a Christian Catholic confession, that he's telling everything to clear his conscience and be free of the guilt for everything he's done. So I think he says everything.
And it's also interesting to note that you have a succession of things and he's the one who does the real thing.
Yes.
What Walt does is basically there's truth with lies intertwined throughout, so it's more of a lie than anything true. Marie going to therapy, which would be a usual staging area for confessions of what's going on with your, chooses not to use her time there, which is basically, it would be like going to a church and getting in the confession box, but then not being willing to tell the priest anything. It's like, you seem troubled. And it's like, Jesse actually is doing it.
And I get the impression from them on the terrace that I think what they thought, it was so much bigger than what they thought, that even just Walt making meth, the scope of it, the breadth of it, I think that even what they expected, what Jesse told them, kind of surprised them.
Oh yeah. And bear in mind, because obviously he's told them about all these things that have happened over the last several, which meant killing the two guys before, back in season 3 when he ran them over with the car, and the Gale situation, and and so on and so on. So they're already realizing just how Hank already thought he was a monster because he knew about the 10 guys in prison or whatever. This just built on top of that. And yet, even if it's quote unquote indirectly, none of them even know, hey, you know what? There's one more big list of death on Walt's ledger because he let, Jesse, he hasn't told you yet. He let your girlfriend choke to death on her own vomit, which pretty much led to her dad kind of going, I'm not cute. I'm just going to let this go. And, 130 something people dying in a plane crash. It's got a pretty big kill list if you add those into it. Anyway, yeah, just saying. I should also point out, because I know you talked before about, initially, because of the scene between Walt and Hank, one could see their way to, I think I can root for Hank here. And then the way he is with Skylar or whatever, it's like, oh, maybe not. But then you kind of keep falling back. I was like, yeah, but this kind of part of me wants to root for him because, let's see what happens here. I feel that kind of goes away a little bit now because it's in this scene. Because remember, most people watching the show at this point, I think you said, Jesse's the heart of the show right now. So Jesse is also the one that despite the fact he spends way too much time being in some weird depressed void, he's still the one that we will identify with and root for whenever possible. So Hank is now, and it's post-confession, and it's when he says the junkie murderer line, but we also realize Hank is now about to be as ruthless as anything Walt has done. Because the whole fear of that Jesse could be killed, like by a sniper or however which way he might be killed. Hank doesn't care. So then we'll catch him for that. That's pretty cold, bro. It's cold, bro.
And, not that he would have went to those lengths with Skylar, but you see Jesse genuinely helps him, and the second his usefulness is over, it's like, well, I got what I want. Like, screw you. I'm not saying if Skylar had told Hank the full truth at that table on that as it poured out over Hank with his emotions, I don't think he would have done Skylar right.
I don't know. I have to think about that because at least he definitely has an emotional and family attachment to Skylar. It is his sister-in-law after all. Whereas Jesse, up until now, he hates Jesse. Although now he's put it together that I guess we skipped it. I wish I had mentioned it. I love, maybe it was back in the first episode that we talked about here. I love when Hank puts it together that, wait a minute, you're the one responsible for the call I got that made me think that, Marie had been in the accident and everything. So it's, which is what leads to him going off and being the shadow of Jesse, which leads to this, it all goes back to Walt. Anyway. So, get back to the end of the episode, let's finish it up. It's the plaza scene when Jesse is supposed to meet Walt there. I'm going to go out on a limb. I think, I remember when I watched it, I'm suspecting everybody when they watched it. The guy that Jesse thinks is maybe some thug working for Walt, I'm pretty sure we all know, we were all like, no, he's not. They're going to pull a little thing. I literally was expecting to be, we're going to see there's like a baby stroller or something by him or something like that. And there was a little kid who comes running up to him or something. So again, I'm not knocking him for being predictable. I just it's just, that has to be the way this is going to work because it's always the, if only. That's the way these shows always work out their things, and they make their decision based on lack of or faulty information, which has dire consequences. Breaking Bad has certainly done it. The Sopranos, oh my God, has certainly done it. A number of shows, and then they're usually the top tier shows, have done that. Because one could be inclined to believe that Walt is still trying to be sincere here, although obviously he's trying to save his own ass as well. But at this point, between the message, the call that Walt gets from Jesse and how that goes down, and I'm glad to see this is early. This is enough number of years ago where there's still payphones everywhere. But and I love Jesse just walking off as knowing full well that car is gonna screech up to him like, what the fuck are you doing, whatever. And that's when he has the whole, I have another way, a better way, whatever. But it's it's the end of the episode where you realize at this point, our thinking might have been, has Jesse just signed his own death warrant because he's going to give in to what Saul thought and what Skylar thought and he calls up his friend Todd. By the way, when he begins that little conversation with Todd, I found it weird that he said, "Hey, it's Walt." Maybe it's just me. I don't know. They don't have that many conversations because he's much like Jesse. Mirror. He only refers to him as Mr. White. It just seems weird because they don't have that kind of relationship that he would say, "Hey, it's Walt." But whatever, it's fine. But I'm not saying it's wrong. Again, maybe he's trying to be friendly with him because I have another job for your uncle, and that's how we end the episode. Whatever.
I think he's a student enough of Todd to see that being softer with Todd is the way in. I think it's a manipulation.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. So if you enjoyed this podcast, and wow, look at that smashing result we gave you here. You'll enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Like the page and join the conversation about shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and so many others. You can find our podcast pretty much anywhere because you're listening to it, so you must have found it somewhere. But you can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. Yes, the one with Joe Rogan, right? Yeah, we got that one. Amazon Music, whatever. Do I mention that every podcast? I think I do now. But better still, in my opinion, if I may. Also, you can actually find us most of the time on YouTube. I think it's like 5 out of every 6 of our podcasts show up there. I don't know. I don't understand it. But all the downloads and listens don't show up. Anyway, but you can listen to all 337 of our podcasts on stvdpodcast.podbean.com. Why am I tapping my finger while I tell you this? You can also follow us on Instagram. It would be nice if people followed us on Instagram. Our handle there is Serious TV Drama, all is one word. And finally, you can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. That's STVD as in Serious TV Drama. Next week, we will be finishing up the final 4 episodes of Breaking Bad. I have a dilemma. I knew it was a dilemma from the moment we started this rewatch podcast, whatever. It is what it is. Listeners of the STV podcast know full well that I might have spent an hour or 2 or more talking about one of those upcoming episodes in a podcast last year, because that episode, obviously I'm talking about Ozymandias, did come in number 1 on the greatest TV episode of all time countdown. It's when I had my friend from AMC here to talk about it, whatever. Whatever. You know what? It means I don't have to take as many notes this time around. And, you guys can, if you guys don't have stuff to say about that episode, then I don't know what you have to talk about. So there you go. So we will be finishing up all the final 4 episodes next week. My hope, my expectation, my plan is to get that podcast released on the Friday before Better Call Saul premieres, which will be the following Monday on April 18th. I believe they are going to have a 2-episode premiere because why not, I guess. The plan right now, as much as I would love and prefer to get a podcast about about Better Call Saul out as soon as possible, unfortunately, I am not really able to record on Mondays and Tuesdays for the next couple months, which means that's out. And scheduling conflicts with other folk kind of mean Wednesdays, generally speaking, is going to be out too. So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to record on, if possible, we're going to record on Thursdays. And I'll get that sucker out to you guys Friday morning, so at least you can listen to it Friday and through the weekend, and maybe Monday when you're commuting. Well, if anyone's commuting anymore, I don't know. But you should be able to get it listened in, the days before the next episode comes out on Monday. I'd rather not give you such a short window of time to have it, but you know what? Most people listen within the first couple days anyway, so you'll be fine. Also for the final 4, hopefully, all four of us, which means Jamie will return as well to talk about those final 4 episodes. So, which means it'll be a really long podcast. So, you're welcome, God. And that's about it. I can't think of anything else. So let me say thank you guys for joining the podcast once again and talking about these fine 4 episodes of The Breaking of the Bad.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I hate both of you. All right, you know what? If you think our content took a kind of a downturn in these last few minutes, don't worry. Stay tuned. You're gonna get a couple minutes more of Breaking Bad. And until then, I don't know. Goodbye. Good night, everybody.
I ever tell you about my Star Trek script?
Star Trek script?
Yeah, I gotta write it down is all. The Enterprise is 5 parsecs out of Rigel 12. Nothing's going on, neutral zone is quiet, the crew is bored, so they put on a pie eating contest. The whole crew's in the galley. They're eating Tullaberry pies. Tullaberries. From Gamma Quadrant, yo.
That's Voyager, dude.
Okay, blueberries then. They're eating blueberry pies.
Better.
As fast as the replicator can churn them out. Finally, it's down to just 3. Kirk, Spock, and Chekhov. Okay, Spock always wins these things.
How is Spock gonna beat Kirk, yo? Spock's like a toothbrush. Look at Kirk. He's got room to spare.
Spock has total Vulcan control over his digestion. You want to hear this or not?
Yeah, go.
Okay, finally, Kirk. He can't take it anymore. He yorks. Now it's just down to Chekhov and Spock. But Chekhov, you see, he's got a whole fat stack of Quatloos writing on this. And he has figured out a way to win. He's got Scotty back in the transporter room, locked in on Chekhov's stomach. Every time Chekhov eats a pie, Scotty beams it right out of him.
Where's he sending him? The toilet?
Space! There's blueberries just floating out there, frozen because it's in space, and Chekhov is just shoveling them into his mouth, and Spock's like, I can't believe this Russian is defeating me. Meanwhile, Scotty's in the transporter room fiddling with levers when Lieutenant Uhura comes in, and she's got, her big pointies, and Scotty's fingers are all sweaty.
No.
Chekhov screams, he sprays blood out of his mouth.
Oh.
Scotty beamed his guts into space.
No way!